This is the Tabernacle Podcast with me, Britton Bishop. Today, I am joined by the one and only student ministries pastor, young adults pastor, next gen kind of leader at Westside Community Church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just Westside Community Church in Traverse City. AJ Garcia. What's up, AJ? How we doing, bro?
What's up? Glad to be here.
Absolutely, bro. Pumped to have you here. Excited. This has been one we've been trying to do for a minute. One that I think will continue into some different type of like topics and segments and different things like that. But I felt like today, before we jump into as you being a continued guest, letting people get to know you, let the podcast family kind of know who you are, where you come from, all that kind of stuff. So today we're going to jump into AJ Garcia's changed life story. But before we do that, you'll see here that we have these incredible little white cups with a black logo on it that I have no idea what it is, but every good coffee shop has a logo that you don't know what it is. This is Mundo's Coffee. Lily Vermelia, if you're listening to this, no free shout-outs. Mundo's, we need a sponsorship. So, yeah, I know AJ has spent plenty of money at Mundo's over the years.
Yes.
I've participated in those activities. But even if it was just like a cheddar lime hash burrito every Thursday morning just to get us going before the pod or whatever, maybe bring the waffle back.
Bring the waffle back.
Yeah, the cheddar lime waffle back.
That we need a savory waffle.
I might get a shirt made that just says "Bring the waffle back." I'm just gonna wear it every time I go to Mundo's.
You're gonna start something.
Absolutely. So
yeah, Dan Clark. Let's talk. No free shout outs.
No free shout outs, Dan. But if you're looking for good coffee in Traverse City, Mundo's is your spot. I about roasted like 4 different coffee shops and I stopped myself.
That's discipline.
Just because I know Adam listens to this, but I was like, no, there might be somebody out there that loves the coffee shop Adam likes that will not be named on this podcast.
Right. Okay. All right.
That will not be named.
All right.
Because I'm not ever shouting that out.
Well, look, Mundo's can go to toe to toe with any coffee shop out there.
Facts. Absolutely. Love Mundo's. Lily Vermelia works there. She is easily my favorite barista that they have, and I mean that. So I don't actually know any of the other baristas. So, but Christians,
Christians,
Christian owned,
great family.
Yeah.
A couple of them go to our church. A couple of the owners, great people, and they love the Lord. They love good coffee, and the thing that distinguishes them between other nerdy, pretentious coffee shops is that I'm glad you said they got all the nerdiness. I'm glad you said and none of the pretentiousness.
Yeah, but still no free shout outs.
Yeah, of course.
Mundo's, no free shout outs. So, yeah, excited, man, to jump in with you today into the Change Life story. But maybe, trying to think, Benji, what's a question we've asked our guests before, first time questions they get on here before we jump in?
What was it like growing up?
Yeah. That's how we start the Change Life stories. My boy Benji on the mic. I just wanted to say
on the ones
would
and
join
twos.
us today. Pastor John is at a beauty appointment, I believe. I don't actually know if that's true or not. I just made that up. But they always make up some insane story when I'm gone that I'm doing something that I'm not.
Right.
And so I'm going to take advantage of that today and say that Pastor John's probably getting his eyebrows done right now or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's why he's missing this episode. But it is what it is. He's not here.
It's fine.
No,
he heard I was coming on. He was like, not that guy.
Yeah. I love it. So, yeah, man, what is kind of your first memory growing up?
Whoa, that's a good question. First memory? It's random, but I remember growing up with my mom and dad, me and my brother, we moved Danny G. We moved down to Texas, South Texas, and we were living with my grandma. My grandparents and some of her siblings, they had like a little compound, if you will. So they had a couple houses on the property. They had a trailer or two. We had an old school bus. I don't know how we got the school bus, but we like made that into like a little room. They had fans on it and stuff before like the camping van became cool.
Oh, your family was rocking one of those.
Right. So we're OGs, but it was in Texas, and so it was just sweaty and gross. So we were broke, and I remember my first memory is we picked up Taco Bell.
Hey,
they brought it to the house. I'm eating it. I remember thinking, they need to do something about this shredded lettuce, man. Like it's all over the place. And then I remember like taking a bath, and we had like this giant plastic tub, and we were like sitting in that little giant plastic tub, and it's like a bowl.
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, oh, we're broke. I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Hey,
Yeah.
you know what? Taco Bell still needs to do something about that shredded lettuce.
Right.
I'm a firm believer. I use this as an excuse, but I think it's just an excuse because I think lettuce is such a waste of time if you're not eating a salad. It's like 98% water, something stupid like that. And fun fact,
Okay.
the largest spreader of E. coli in fast food
Oh, wow.
because they don't wash it.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. That's why
That's
I don't
nasty.
get lettuce at Taco Bell. That's why me and Benji are anti-lettuce at Taco Bell, right, Benj? We're chicken quesadillas only around here, dog. So that's crazy, though. So you lived in South Texas. How long were you guys down there for?
10 years.
10 years. So from birth till then, or
3 to 13.
3 to 13. So what was it like growing up in South? Were you guys on like the compound the whole time?
No, we got a house, maybe 5-10 minutes from my grandma's. But in South Texas, a lot of Mexicans, a lot of illegal immigrants, a lot of family there, a lot of gang violence, a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And so going through like upper elementary and early middle school, it started kind of, the conflict rose.
Yeah.
That's where my dad grew up.
Okay.
So we had a lot of family down there, but my mom was from up here in Michigan. And so as we're growing up, like 2008, the recession's happening and they just can't find work. And so we thought, you know what? Well, my parents thought, you know what? Why don't we move up, work with my mom's parents had a family business.
Gotcha.
We'll work with them. And it'll also get the boys out of the school system down here.
Get out of that
So,
situation.
yeah.
Did you find yourself like while you were in that situation, like was there any like pieces of like your identity that were starting to get formed, like as you look back? Because I know for me, like at the time, obviously you don't realize it, but as you look back on like those times in your life, like there are pieces of your identity that get formed. Would you say that there was anything that kind of happened in those like that span of your life that started to form like an identity for you?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things for me was because so through those 10 years, we would also move back and forth from Texas to Michigan, Texas to Michigan.
Okay.
And we'd be up here for a year, down there for, 3 years, up here for a year. And so I was constantly making new friends. I was like the new kid a lot. And so that forced me to adapt. And by nature, I'm a little bit more obnoxious, talkative and annoying. And so I extroverted, some would call it. Yeah. And so it reinforced that in me. So just being able to, make new friends,
and circles
fit in
and stuff like that. Did you find yourself like ever like in those settings, like I'll become whatever this group needs me to be to fit in?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And it became easy to adapt to those different situations. So if I'm around a group of, tough guys, and so I'd put on the face, like, I don't really care. Like, I'll fight anybody. Doesn't bother me. If when I was around like more creatives, like artists, I learned how to play guitar. I was in touch with my emotions, all that stuff. So just learning how to
this
adapt.
is explaining so much.
Yeah.
I love it. So what was like faith like for you, like growing up? Like, was there anything in that 10-year span, like parents, did your family go to church? Did your extended family go to church? Was there any type of like introduction to like the church, the gospel, anything like that?
We grew up as like lukewarm Catholic,
Okay.
right? So we went to church Christmas, Easter, but we were Creasters. We were one of those, but we really only went on like Christmas,
Gotcha.
And really only sometimes when we were looking for to not feel so guilty,
right?
And that's not fair necessarily to put it on my parents, but that was what I would remember. It wasn't really reinforced. It wasn't really pressed into our lives, and so. Yeah. I remember my mom had a King James Bible. She had a rosary, she had some candles that we would light. And so God was, it wasn't as if he didn't exist. And it wasn't as if we never talked about him.
Right.
But it wasn't like an all your heart, soul, mind, and strength kind of relationship. It wasn't, there was no intimacy.
Gotcha.
And so we had the idea of God, the concept of God. Yeah. But without any of the relationship.
It was like a very like religious experience for you at that point, like in those kind of first like formative 10 years. How did that kind of shape like your personal view of like God? Like how, like when you showed up to those spaces or it's Creaster time or whatever, like where were you at with that stuff? Like growing up, was it like? Yeah.
I tried to, I was very curious. I still am pretty curious. And so that's kind of why I love learning about other people's worldviews as well, which helps. I mean, this is another conversation, like apologetics and stuff, but which helps with that.
Martin Rizzi do that one together.
Let's get it. But I remember being very curious, like, okay, if God is real, like, asking all the questions that you might ask that seem elementary, but are like really deep
what were
questions.
Some, like, can you think of any that you were asking at that time?
I remember, just the foundational stuff, like, okay, who is the Spirit? Like, what role does God have in our lives? And I wouldn't have used that language,
right?
But like, who is God? The classic, who made God?
Yeah.
And very scared of hell. Constantly searching out for like angels, demons, spiritual warfare type stuff, realizing that that's a reality, but under focusing certain areas, over focusing in on other areas. So I was just very curious. But that curiosity led me to, a ton of other stuff. At that same time, I was in like 8th grade. Yeah. 7th, 8th grade. So we're learning like evolution and stuff like that. So I'm curious. I was like, all right, well, maybe this is the way, and constantly just trying to find, identity, belonging, trying to find a foundation. Like that, I bet that goes back to early on, constantly adapting,
like bouncing around and stuff,
just like, okay, I need something that's mine, that's real. And so if not like my location, if not, family, because we were kind of bouncing around between family, cousins here, cousins there, so I never really like belonged. And if not any of that, then maybe in like my dogma, my faith, like my worldview. I just need something
to grab onto that's consistent.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So then you so 8th grade, was that when you guys moved? Was 8th grade or was it high school or what was that?
8th grade, 7th, 8th grade. Yeah. But
so you guys moved up to Michigan. Mm-hmm. So where'd you guys move to?
Detroit area. So Livonia. We stayed with her grandparents for a year, and then we got a house in Wayne, Michigan.
There you go.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So you're up in you're in the Detroit area, and like you guys were there all the way through. Parents still there?
Parents still there.
So what was that like, settling into like a spot where it was like, oh, I'm going to be known here, like I don't get to leave?
Bro, I remember moving to the new school thinking, this is it. Like, I'm the new kid on the block. I can reinvent myself to whatever I want to be. And so I thought that this is a perfect opportunity to make myself the version of AJ that I think would be attractive. So, I wanted to be the funny guy. I wanted to be the cool guy. I wanted to get decent grades, not because I cared about the grades, but because I wanted a good job and get the money.
Right.
I wanted to be cool. I want to have friends that think that I am like cool guy, like just think highly of me. I wanted to find a hot girl to date. I wasn't a Christian, so I was like, I don't care. I don't have any boundaries. Like, I just want, I want what the world has to offer. And so looking back, like the pride of youth was just so evident in my heart. I just wanted to be satisfied in whatever areas of my life, whether that was affirmation, whether that was sex and relationships, whether that was, just ego and financial, whatever. And so, I tried to reinvent myself. And so that didn't happen. No. That didn't happen well at all.
Is there any good stories about like you showing up, like trying to be this thing and
then,
like it just falling on your face?
I remember, so this was in like the snapbacks and tattoos era. This was like Mac Miller. This was like Wiz Khalifa. I was, for real. I remember having a snapback on my head and then wearing like really baggy, like basketball shorts, and then like Nike slides or whatever.
Straight Soldier Boy vibes.
Yeah, for real. I remember one time this is how bad it got. I had a snapback on my head, and then I had a snapback hooked to my like belt buckle. Just so that they knew,
Yo, I'm strapped.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's Benji's laughing. You don't know nothing about that snapback on your hip. I kept that thing on me.
Kept it on him.
And so, I was just goofy. And so I tried to get people to like me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was a new kid. So my first week or so at this new school, I'm going in, kind of have open mind, but really, desperately craving something. And I walked into one of the first classes, and there was this kid named Nate who seemed like a cool guy. He introduced himself to me afterwards and was like, "Yo, you're new. Like, let me see your schedule. I can kind of point you in the right direction."
Was this a bigger school than you've ever been to?
It was just a big school.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. So when I graduated, we had, I think, like 400 kids in our class,
cool.
and so it was a pretty big school. And then this was middle school, like 8th grade. He pointed me in the right direction. It turns out, at the time, I thought it was cool. Now I'm like, man, it is God's providence that he it's like Ruth. Like, it just so happened that we had all of the same classes.
Dang.
We lived across the street from each other, and we rode the same bus, and so it was crazy that our schedules lined up so well. So we became good friends, and after about a week or so, it became Wednesday. Wednesday came around, and he invited me to youth group, like any classic, youth group kid. Youth pastor is probably pressing him,
right?
And
this is our new Reach One campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoever brings the most friends gets Air Force Ones.
Stop it. Hey, it works.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you. Let me tell you. I got to do this side story. So we did the same thing with our small groups here like 2 years ago. I was like, yo, whoever brings the most new friends, whatever small group brings the most new people from their grade, at the end of the semester, I'm gonna do a giveaway for some AirPods.
Yeah.
So your small group will get put in a raffle. So they're like, I'm like, yo, kids are gonna go crazy about this. I think we maybe got 3 new kids, and I still had to give away AirPods for a group that brought 2 new kids. Yeah.
That ROI, bro. Hey, kingdom economics.
I love it. So Nate invites you to church.
He invited me to youth group. Yeah. And so, remember, I had a vision for what my middle school and high school, I was setting myself up for success.
Yeah.
I wanted to be cool. I wanted to date the hot girl. I wanted to get rich one day. Yeah. Being a Christian was in direct conflict to that goal. That's not cool.
Right.
Going to church is not cool. And so I had no desire to go. And so I came up with excuses after excuse after excuse.
Let me get some of them.
It was just stuff like, no, I have to go hang out with some family, or I have this one, again, family thing, or I don't have a ride.
Because family stuff can't get there's no refute to,
exactly.
Oh, well,
my mom said no.
Yeah. There's nothing.
And so I thought, man, this is solid. These are great answers. But I couldn't keep recycling the same ones because I saw the kid every day. And so
he was persistent.
But it wasn't annoying. And I could tell that it didn't kill the kid, that if I said no, it's like, no problem. Like, that's cool. And he didn't stop being my friend when I told him no. And this happened for maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks, where I kept telling him no. And so then he invited me again one Wednesday. I said, oh man, I don't have a ride. And he was like, all right, no problem.
Gets them all.
I got you. I can pick you up. So I'm like, dang. So I remember I grew up Catholic. And so he picked me up from school, and I'm going to church. I'm dressed to the nines. And by dressed to the nines, I mean I borrowed my uncle's like dress pants. It was kind of baggy, and I had like my Virgin Mary shirt on, and I had like a rosary on because I'm going to church. And so he knocked on the door because we didn't have phones, and I went out, and I'm like, all right, let's go. And he laughed at me. I'm like, that's really Christian of you, bro, to just laugh at what I'm wearing. And he was like, dude, go change. You don't want to wear that.
That's a good friend.
That's a good friend.
That's a good friend. Because I'd have let you show up looking like a fool, bro.
Yeah. New kid ain't taking none of these girls from me. Like, dressed in all.
Good friend.
Yeah.
That's a good friend.
So I went and changed. Remember,
how many snapbacks did you take?
I took one.
Just one.
Conservative.
Okay. Yeah.
He was like, just wear what you wear to school. So I'm like, all right. Went to church, went to youth group, and I remember walking in, and seeing the like love that they had for each other. I walked in, and there was this dude who is just big dude, beard, like just like man's man, and we're like little middle school boys, and he like is coming up and like giving us like bear hugs, not me, but like some of these other guys, and he introduces himself like, hey, I'm Jordan, like nice to meet you, what's your name, man? And I told him AJ. He was like, very nice to meet you. Any friend of these guys, friend of mine. And I was like, man, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize then what I know now was that was like John 13, 36 kind of love. Like, they will know that you are my disciples by your love for one another. Yeah. And that love was attractive to me because I was longing for that.
Yeah.
And I was longing for the community, for the belonging. And so I saw that, and I kept coming back to youth group. They had food, crazy worship, good preaching, and I kept going back. And maybe a month later, after sitting under, gospel
what was your
preaching,
youth group called?
Under One.
Under One.
Yeah,
okay.
Under One. And after going for a while, during worship, Nate leaned over to me.
Okay.
And he asked me, hey, are you ready to surrender your life to Jesus? And I didn't know systematic theology. I didn't know what justification by faith, meant. I didn't know who Martin Luther and Charles Spurgeon and John Piper were. I didn't know any of these guys.
I still don't.
Yeah, who we're talking about. But I knew that Jesus died for my sins, that he was God. That's good. So I surrendered my life to Jesus. I said, yeah. So he prayed for me. And
in the seats.
Yeah. Well, we were standing up. It was one of those churches.
Okay, during
worship. We sit up front. Yeah. Yeah. So during worship, he prayed over me, and I
What grade were you in?
I was in 8th grade.
That's so dope. Another 8th grader prayed over you, and you gave your life to Christ. So there wasn't like a youth pastor.
No,
like
not involved. Just hearing the preaching.
Bro, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That is such
Ain't that what we want?
Bro, absolutely. I'm sitting here and I'm like, bro, man, you know how much easier our job would be?
Yeah, for real.
I also want to get a bro count on how many times I say it in this podcast. I feel like anytime I'm with like you or like Andrew shows up or somebody like below the age of 50 on the podcast, I instantly go to like speaking how we talk to each other normally.
Absolutely.
And so I imagine the podcast people are like, man, this guy's different when he gets That's so cool though, man. Like, so just to recap, so you kind of show up at this new school, new situation, and you're like, I'm going to reinvent myself right now. Like, I'm going to become this version that the world has told me I need to be. And so, hence, budget for snapbacks, get the whole outfit, like all that stuff. And then you're kind of met, like you said, like God's providence kind of shows up in your life, and it's like, yeah, I got a different idea. And so you get this friend, Nate, and he just sticks with it. Doesn't back down. Keeps inviting. Sooner or later, you run out of excuses. You go to church, and then you were there for how long before you?
I don't remember. I have to say maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. Yeah. Where I'm just.
And are you actively like asking questions, having conversations over that time, or is it just like you're kind of like sitting back and observing all this?
It was a lot of observing, and a lot of stubborn pushback. So, like, I would hear things that were new to me, and I was the annoying one who was like, I don't know if I believe that. Or it's like, yeah, but it's like...
Would you say that, or was it just like an internal thing?
With some of the friends,
yeah.
The more I got comfortable, yeah. And so, like...
Did you guys, like, do, like, small groups and stuff?
Yeah, so we had like, middle school boys, high school boys, middle school girls, high school girls. That's how we broke it up. And so some of my guys, when we were hanging out outside of it, because I didn't plug in the small groups at that point, because it was, they met on Wednesday nights, but small groups were outside, so like a Thursday or whatever day works for the leader. And so I remember just like hanging out. We're walking, after the bus stop, or we're going out and getting food, and then the kids were like evangelizing to me, and I was like, nah, like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, what you didn't know was behind the scenes, they had a plan. Like,
yeah.
We're leading this new kid to Christ. He has no other option.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
And I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah.
in hindsight, at the time though, I'm like, man, these guys are really passionate about this. And so yeah, they're asking me questions. So we had this thing called the silver ring thing. This is purity culture.
Yeah.
So they're going around the country to different churches and basically trying to get you to buy a purity ring, talking about sex and pornography and the dangers of all that, the importance of giving over all of your life to the Lord and living in holiness. And so I remember vividly that the silver ring thing, and that was the first time that I ever the concept of pornography being bad was even brought up. It was taboo. No one talked about it.
Right.
But it was like, it's just what guys do.
Yeah.
And so in the church, there was this video. I remember hearing it, like talking about all these sins, and then pornography was one of the sins that it was talking about. And I thought, what? Like that's lumped in with, murder and hate, and that's lumped in with all these other things. And I remember leaving, and they had a bunch of purity rings for sale, and all the youth group kids were like, which ring are you getting? Which ring are you getting? And I was like, I'm not getting a purity ring. I don't want to make a promise to God that I'm not going to keep. And so what was desire to not be a hypocrite,
right,
which was good. At the same time, like I didn't want to give that part up in my life.
Yeah.
I had
just like kind of idle.
Yeah. And so that was one thing that my friends were talking to me about, kind of trying to teach me what the Bible has to say about that area.
Yeah.
And I was just pushing back.
Yeah.
But in those 4 to 6 weeks, which is a short period of time,
right,
we had some pretty deep conversations.
100%. That's so
good.
Cool, bro. So cool. And then you're at youth group, in the middle of worship.
Yeah.
Nate's just like, hey, bro, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He just prays you. That's such a cool story.
Yeah.
That it's just students leading students. That's such a that's the vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we do what we do. That's why we teach the things we teach. It's not so we can grow these big student ministries where they come hear us preach every week. It's so that students will be leading other students.
Absolutely.
That's such a cool just like picture and vision of like, man, this is what ministry looks like.
Yeah.
I think it can be encouraging just to the person listening, that just persistent obedience. Because I'm assuming Nate wasn't the most well-read, wasn't
right.
the most well-educated,
right.
But he was faithful. He knew that Jesus changed his life, and so he was going to tell his buddy.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he went out, like you were just his friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like he built a relationship with you. He spent time with you.
Yeah.
And I just think that's such a cool testimony for people listening to this podcast, or students maybe that listen to this podcast, or even parents and older people, but just your consistent relationship with non-believers and continuing to point them back to Jesus. He's faithful to do the work.
Amen.
Like the requirement is not for you to know all the answers. The requirement isn't for you to save them, because as we all know, not possible.
Right.
But there's something about just like persistent relationship that brings people into the kingdom. And I think it's such a cool, like I think like as you're sharing that story, I think about my own story and my friend Dalton, that like he wasn't there the night I gave my life to Christ, completely like surrendered everything. But I think he prayed for me for like 7 years, like was always a friend, like could count on him. Like he was the one that would he was just always there. We were horrible friends back to him, but he always showed up. And then I remember getting to call him and be like, hey dude, like I'm doing this. And like still to this day, we were just texting today about golf stuff now. But
wow.
I mean, one of my group, but I think there's something about like that persistent relationship in pouring into non-believers that is important. Because I think what can happen is we get in these Christian circles and we surround ourselves with people that think the same way and believe the same way, which is good for community. But I think we lose sight of the mission in that sense. And so I think it's just so encouraging to hear that story that it worked.
It's relational evangelism.
Yeah.
And so that's there's a place for, guys standing at the, street corner and they're preaching the gospel. So long as it's, consistent with scripture and they're preaching truth in love,
that's a key
I'm all
piece,
for
in
it.
Love.
Yeah, I'm all for that. There's a place for that, and you can do it well.
You can also do it really
absolutely.
poorly. Yeah.
But my emphasis is on relational evangelism.
Yeah, that's so good.
So you want to evangelize? Okay, how about instead of you going out of your way to preach to the stranger on the mission trip, how about you preach to your mom? How about you do the dishes before she asks you, and you say, by the way, this is what I'm learning in church, in youth group, on Sunday, wherever, and it made me think of you. And I just wanted you to know I love you and God loves you.
That's so good. That's so good.
And so I was like I said, I was the only one who grew up, or I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and so I was the first one to surrender their life to Jesus
In your whole house?
in my whole house.
Dang.
And so, over the years, I was inviting, different friends or whatever, and I realized like, oh man, like I need to turn this back to my family.
When did that click for you?
Probably like maybe 2 or 3 years.
After?
A long time.
Yeah, so like sophomore, junior year?
Yeah. And my brother,
shout out Danny G.
Shout out Danny G. Pastor.
Cold.
Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
So obviously he ended up coming to youth group with me, and he was the middle schooler that wanted to hang out with all the high schoolers.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I
And
can see
so
that for sure.
I mean, for me, like I don't let middle school siblings hang out with the high school siblings.
Right.
I'm like, no, we're separating you two in small groups and other stuff. Like, I'm sorry, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
And part of that is me still holding on to big brother energy, where I'm like, nah, that's not happening. And so, I was gonna tell a story, but
hey, tell it. We got all the time in the world.
nah, not that one. But I will say that Danny G came, so he was hanging out with his older brother's friends, and
did you invite him?
I invited him.
What did that process look like?
He was a little brother, so he wanted to come.
Yeah.
He wanted to come hang, and so I let him.
Yeah.
I didn't push back. Me inviting him was more so me, not uninviting him, not like stiff arming him.
Got you.
And so he came, he hung out, and this is his testimony, sure. But later on in the years, like Bible college, he's in Bible college. He's years of going through the motions. He ended up surrendering, hearing a sermon preached, and realized like, man, I was faking it.
Yeah,
like,
I think Danny and I gave our lives to Christ to the same message, not at the same time, but to the same message.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out Adrian Dupree.
Adrian Dupree, 4 chairs.
Yeah, 4 chair message.
Our students, we just went on a mission trip to Columbia, South Carolina a few weeks ago, and just through relationship with Adrian, our connection through Forge and stuff, we went over to his house one night for dinner, and took there's like 30, 40 of us, something like that. Took them all to his living room, packed them in. We had laser tag in the backyard afterwards.
What?
But
That's crazy.
But I was like, hey, bro, like I was just going to have him do like passion, like living passionately for Jesus, something like that for the students. And that day I was like, dang it. Because it just hit me. I was like, man, like some of our kids like need to hear 4 chairs and what it is and what it offers. And it's crazy ADHD of all time, and he knows it. But the Spirit of God shows up in it, and it works. And I saw some of our students just get fired up about the gospel, the reality of what was going on. So, yeah, it was a cool moment. You remember that, Benj?
Yeah.
How many times have you heard 4 chairs, you think?
That was, first time I actually listened to it.
Okay.
But he did make some people cry laughing. So
Yeah. We had students who were like, I was about to pee my pants. Get away from me. So it was cool, though. It was cool. So, yeah, me and Danny G are a part of that gang. So,
that's awesome.
Adrian, that the guy I had on the podcast, brother, gave us like, it's cool. He always loves hearing those stories. So
that's amazing.
But yeah. So give your life to Christ. Obviously, life changed completely at that point, and you were just kind of getting after it from then on out, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's how that goes. Yeah. So 8th grade, I was trying, but in my 4 years, so that was at the end of 8th grade. In my 4 years of high school, of going to youth group, we had 5 different youth pastors.
Dang, that's hard.
Yeah, and so I had different youth leaders, and just witnessing, pastoral failure and the messy part of church. And
did that have any impact on you?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the mud, in the thick of it for a lot of those pieces, and just just immorality, moral failures, and I could talk about that too. But through that time, again, like I wanted belonging, and I was so desperate as a young boy who gave his life to Christ to like be discipled. I knew that I needed that.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anyone around me to do that.
Yeah. You and Nate still homies?
Not me and Nate aren't that much, aren't as close. But one of the other guys in that crew, Zach, he is, one of my best friends.
At that point, or were you
at that point?
Okay.
And to this day.
That's cool.
Another one of those guys, Terrence. They're both groomsmen in my weddings,
cool.
best friends. Love those guys.
So desperate for discipleship.
Desperate. And it's really sad when the one who is longing to be discipled, like we think as older guys, like, man, I just want to pour into to young guys. It's important. I want to. I want to, develop them, teach them, love on them. Slap them around if they need to.
Yeah, right.
So we want to teach them.
Yeah.
And it was really tough to be on the other side of it, where I'm desperate for somebody to teach me the ways of the Lord, like to raise me up in the knowledge and admonition of the Lord. And there wasn't anyone to do that. And so Jordan, big dude that I first met, I really he was a middle school leader. He was really close to me, Nate, Zach, Terrence, all these guys. And it was maybe a year into our relationship. He was engaged to Zach, his sister.
Okay.
They ended up getting married, and it was such a beautiful wedding. I remember thinking, like, this guy's about to kind of take a lead over, like, to be a junior high pastor.
Yeah.
Really influenced by him. He loved the Lord, and was like passionate about seeing us like cling to the scriptures and live it out. And so got married. They were driving down to Myrtle Beach, and this was on a Sunday morning. They were going on their honeymoon. And I remember leaning over to my buddy Zach, and we were talking. And in the middle of service, somebody came up to him, pulled Zach out of church. Like, what's going on? And so we didn't think anything of it really, but like, oh, maybe his mom was on staff, so maybe something happened out there. And so a little bit later, another person came out and grabbed me, grabbed Terrence, Nate, some of his friends, and they let us know that there was an accident where Jordan and his wife Heather, they got into an accident on their way to Myrtle Beach, and we don't know what happened. They're at the hospital right now, and so they told us, like, as any good adult would, like, hey, your friend needs you.
Yeah.
He's gonna need to be with family, but right now he needs you.
Yeah.
So we're kind of confused. What's going on? We don't know, and so we're sitting in there just anticipating more information.
Yeah.
Well, we got a phone call. They got a phone call that Heather was all right. By the grace of God, she only had a few scratches on her. But Jordan, he passed away on impact. So it was a tragedy. It was tough. And there was, after, grieving through that, I look back and I see a few things. I see how the church body came together in such intimacy. So it was such a fresh and immediate response to suffering and loss that impacted my life and my understanding of death and the reality of us not having tomorrow promised. And I remember thinking that this legacy. So as a middle school boy, or at this point I was a freshman. As a freshman, thinking how important that mission that Jordan had for us was to live out. And so me and some of my small group, we took it on ourselves of like, we're going to carry on his legacy. And his legacy was to get the gospel out and to have a generation of young people who knew and loved Jesus. And so that legacy, like sparked a passion with me and some of the guys in my youth group.
Yeah.
And so that was my first kind of taste of suffering and ministry.
Yeah.
And that was tough.
Yeah. It's hard.
Over the
stuff.
over the years, we had a couple different pastors, youth leaders who, like I said, fell into sexual immorality. Some of it what they were arrested for. Child molestation. Some of it was inappropriate relationships with female leaders, and all of it, like, they were close friends,
Yeah, it's
people
hard.
who I knew and I loved, and church split over theology. There was a Calvinist and an Assemblies of God church, so it was like, all right,
It's crazy you're still sitting here following Jesus
Yeah.
coming out of all of that. It's
Yeah.
just such a like. I'm curious. Like, was there, like, I'm sure there were like these moments of like wavering, like, but like, what was the tension you were living in the midst of like what our generation loves to coin like church hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and like, why are you still sitting here, like, considering all the things you've been through, all the things you've seen, all the things that you've been impacted by with a youth leader that you looked up to passing away in a tragic accident, and then youth pastor after youth pastor like falling into moral failure, and then like a church split. Like, you have so many reasons to coin like church hurt as the reason you don't do this anymore. And so, like, one, like, I'd love for you to take like just a moment to like speak to church hurt, but two, like, to the person that maybe has experienced those things, like encouraging and like taking like a pastoral stance at those, but also speaking from your own experience, like, why did you keep showing up?
At the foundation, it's the grace of God for real. And I don't want to underplay that. Like, it is the grace of God that held me. John 10, Jesus talks about that the Father gave him his sheep. He's our shepherd. The Father gave him the sheep, and that he is holding on to us. And we hear his voice, we know him. And the shepherd is the good shepherd who takes care of his sheep, and no one will snatch them out of the Father's hand. And I felt the comfort of a shepherd holding on to me. And I could have easily been the sheep that ran away.
Right.
But he clung to me. I never used the term church hurt to describe my own past, although it is valid, and I understand if defined rightly and understood, healthily, then of course there's church hurt.
I think it's one of the most weaponized phrases
Absolutely
in our culture today, towards the church, that our generation loves to use as a reason, excuse, whatever you want to call it. But so
and so for me, on top, God's grace as a foundation, but also God's grace through a community of friends who were right there with me. I think there is power in fraternity. I think there is power in friendship. And when people are doing something together, it's the band of brothers mentality.
That's so good.
And so we were all in the trenches together. We cried together. We laughed together. We stayed up late together. For a lot of us, when some of us, a lot of us didn't grow up in the best like home situations. We didn't call our youth pastor to pick us up when another one ran away.
Right.
We got into our cars as 16, 17-year-old dudes, and we drove around the city looking for our friend. When the parents were like, he ran away, we don't know where he's at. And we had people stay over one another's houses, and we lived it out. And so I think it's the grace of God in the community, and it was the Spirit of God who revealed to me what, not like the special revelation, but like what is in God's word. And I believed it. It was so plain to me of what a pastor ought to be, what a man of God, or just like a Christian, a follower of Christ, what they should look like. And the examples of pastors and leaders that I was seeing fail wasn't consistent with what I saw the way of Jesus was. So my answer wasn't like, my response to that couldn't have been, the way of Jesus is the problem. It's that these sinful men they are distorting what Jesus so clearly laid out in his word.
That's such a huge difference, because so many people allow their experience to shape the way they view Scripture,
Right.
rather than allowing Scripture to shape the way they view the culture and the things that they're experiencing. And I think that whenever we get those two lenses twisted, that's where we start to see those problems start to rise up. So that's such a mature outlook, though, and it just speaks to who you are as an individual to this day. I think anybody that knows you knows you're wise well beyond your years. You're well read. No, you are, bro. You're well read, well studied, and I think that all, you can see all that play out in your commitment to God and His Word and to the standard that He's set forth. But yeah, no, I just love that you're bringing it back to like, no, I know this is what Jesus' plan was, and it's not His fault that these guys fell into sin.
That's right.
Like he told us this was going to happen. But He promised us that this is who He is.
Right.
And so I just love that picture, and I think that's such an encouragement. So what would your like encouragement be to the individual maybe that's listening to this that has experienced, for the lack of a better way to say it, church hurt? But I think it's important to note that church doesn't hurt people. People hurt people. The church was Jesus's idea, and it's the people within that local body context that are hurting you, people that are inept to sin, that are broken, fallen people. But so how would you speak into that and encourage those people that maybe have experienced that hurt?
I think that for every terrible pastor whose elders need to get together and kick them out of the pulpit, for every sinful human that has abused their authority and the police need to get involved, for every slip of the tongue or every harsh word, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of faithful men who lead the church well, and they aren't publicized. And so church hurt's real, and that's terrible, especially when the ones who are supposed to be loving you the most tenderly are the ones who are like terrorizing you.
Yeah.
But the response cannot be to abandon God and His church, but to cling to the church as it ought to be. And so I think you have a few options. You can either seek out to like reform your church, and to try and change it, to speak out against it. And maybe God wants to use you to call it out, call the sin out. And I pray that sin gets exposed. Yeah. Or if not that, to go to a different church, find a good gospel preaching, Bible believing, Christ exalting church that is not perfect, but are faithful to His word and are trying. Or third option is to plant a church. Okay, so this one's a bad one, and they don't want to change. There are no other options in your city. Well, maybe God wants to use you to plant a church. Yeah. That's like, you know what? This is not your idea, but I need to do it the way God designed it and Christ instructed and Paul outlined for us to plant. Right. So I think those are three options. Of course, Christian counseling, like biblical counseling, is a beautiful thing because there are men and women who've gone through suffering and who can offer godly wisdom and counsel to you. And you can't do it alone. That's key. You cannot do it alone.
Yeah, it's so key because that's such a piece. Like the enemy uses those things to isolate us, to disperse us, to spread us out, because then the attack's easier. It's harder when we band together in those moments. I love that. And I think too, like echoing what you said, like when you face those controversies or those hurts or that sin, navigating that in the realm of Matthew 18 is key. So that's not like, hey, let's build up a big group of people that are going to then go call this individual out. Like, no, like Scripture's clear. If there is sin in the body, like one-on-one as the beginning of that, going to that individual face-to-face in person, it's not a email, it's not a text message, it's a face-to-face interaction. And then if that doesn't work, bringing someone else with you, a brother, to then bring awareness. Then thirdly, getting the whole church involved, finding an elder or a pastor or something of that sense to then. But I think navigating in that realm is good, because I think that's something that people do poorly, is just kind of how they navigate that. It's easier to get everybody on your side and then go after it.
Right.
But I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to do so. And Scripture's pretty clear on that.
Yeah. And I will add, and you'll agree, that the Matthew 18 is a foundation and does outline that. But the only addition I'll make, because there might be some people in this situation, unfortunately, if it's not like, man, this pastor is pretty arrogant and harsh. So yeah, go 1-to-1, 2-to-1 church. But if there is abuse that is
100%.
illegal,
100%.
malicious or anything to that degree, then bypass that and then go to the ones that you need to. But yeah, 100%. I know you'd agree, but I just wanted to throw that out
good.
there.
100%. So all that stuff happens. You're finding yourself in community. There's huge turnover in your student ministry, and all of this stuff is going on. How do you transition like through those high school years? Like I think you met some girl, some stuff happened in there. So kind of break that stuff down.
Yeah, so I met a few girls, and that is probably one of my biggest regrets.
Yeah.
And as a young Christian guy, was just not caring about the hearts of women. So once I got to a place where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of confident, like I for the most part, I know who I am. As if we ever do, but like for the most part, I'm like, all right, I'm confident in who I am.
Yeah.
That quickly turned into ego.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anyone in my life to check me on it, which I so wish I had.
Yeah.
But as a 17, 18-year-old dude, like I thought I was the guy. I started losing a little bit of weight. I had some of the teenage chub off, and so
Baby
I'm like,
fat smell,
I'm like, I'm that guy. I'm a little talkative.
Heavy mustache.
What I'm saying? I couldn't at the time. That might have deterred some women. That might have worked in my favor in the long run.
The Lord
but
humbling you.
Yeah. So I was just I thought I was that guy.
Yeah.
And I was leading Bible studies. I was starting Christian clubs. I was the face. I was one of the few faces of my youth group in the school, the public school. And all the while, like I'm messing around with all these girls, addicted to pornography. I am proud and arrogant. And I thought, I was God's answer, to the world around me.
Yeah.
And I hurt so many people. I was such a bad witness to the gospel in my school. And Carissa, my wife, she was telling me, looking back in high school, like I wasn't that bad, but I knew my heart.
Right.
I knew how much of a whitewashed tomb I was.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, nobody has to tell me that. Like I knew it.
I knew it. Yeah.
And so that was kind of the season of life I was in. But I was in yearbook class, and this is like my junior year, and I was the only guy in yearbook. Okay, and some guys might think, why would you want to be the only guy in yearbook?
Hey,
but
I know.
Everyone knows why I want to be the only guy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I kept the options open. And so I was the only guy in yearbook, and I had a whole room full of girls that I was, trying to get to like me. And there was this one girl who I, became friends with over the years. And I remember like the day that she got her braces off, like she came into class a little late. And
that's hilarious.
Yeah, the teacher was
knowing
like,
her profession now.
Yeah, right. So the day she got her braces off, she comes to class, and everyone's like, the teacher and everyone's like, oh my gosh, smile, Carissa, smile. And so she smiled, and then it was just like,
It was over.
angels singing. I'm like, this girl's got
She's
some
gonna be
beautiful
so
teeth.
mad when she hears this.
Yeah, for real.
Like, you're so corny, AJ.
I know. Well, it wasn't. I'm lying. It wasn't like that.
But like low key in your
But
head.
yeah. I'm like, oh man, this. So I noticed her. I was like, man, this girl's awesome.
Yeah.
She's pretty. I like her. She's sassy.
I was
She's
gonna
fun.
say, she's still mean back then.
Oh, she wasn't a Christian back then. So imagine
love
it,
it.
and then imagine the Spirit not holding her back. Because
I'm not convinced it does when it comes to me.
yeah, well, sometimes we got to hear it. And so I remember just being friends.
Yeah.
She had a boyfriend at the time. I wanted to play the field, and so there was no like romantic relationship
Yeah.
developing. But over the years, we got closer, became really good friends, and we had kind of messy relationships.
Right.
Again, I was coming to the end of myself. The Lord was humbling me.
Yeah.
I realized, man, I'm really hurting girls right now. I gotta step it up.
Yeah.
And this is no way a Christian should behave.
Yeah.
And Carissa was in a pretty toxic relationship. And so we both kind of came together, and because so it wasn't like two strangers kind of coming and rebounding, but we were really good friends.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, maybe. And so we started talking, started hanging out, feelings kind of built up. And all the while, I was inviting her to youth group.
So she still wasn't a Christian.
Still wasn't a Christian. I was inviting her to youth group, and she was coming to, a Christian club at the school.
Yeah.
And I had a Bible study that I did on like Saturdays. And so she was getting involved. We were friends. And so she was coming to all those things. And then eventually, through us kind of getting, like growing in feelings towards one another, started liking each other. She kept coming. And ultimately, I laid it on the table like, all right, look, like I like you, but like we can't do anything unless you surrender your life to Jesus. Like this got to be real for you.
Yeah.
Like that's not so that I could date her,
Right.
but we're moving in a direction, and she was hearing the gospel proclaimed,
Right.
and she was making those steps. And so I have the privilege and the honor to be able to, share the gospel with her. And the Lord used me to pray with her, and she surrendered her life to Jesus.
Yeah.
So we started dating, and
Is that immediately after?
it was pretty close after. And through that, the insecurity was, okay, is she doing it for me, or is this real?
Yeah.
So it finally got to the point, and Carissa,
Yeah.
she's real. So like she'll tell you like it is,
100%.
even if you don't want to hear it.
Yeah. That's why she's a homie.
I love that about her. And so finally we got to the point where I'm like, is this real for you, or are you doing this for me? And she was like, AJ, you need to stop thinking of yourself so highly. Like I'm not doing this for you. Like I believe it. Stop asking me. It's not about you.
Love it.
I'm like, will you marry me? I'm like, I love this girl. She's so real. And so, like that, that was a sweet moment for her to remind me, like, no, this isn't about you. It's about Christ. And
That's so cool.
He saved me.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you met her.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you do after high school?
Went to Bible college.
Okay.
Went to Grace. That's where Andrew Clark, he's been on here before. He graduated from Grace. His family, his big brother and sister, went to Grace, and so I went there. My brother Danny G, he graduated from there too, and so good school. Love those people, and
How long were you at Grace?
I was there for a year in person.
Okay.
And then
So what kind of break down that transition?
Yeah.
Like kind of give us the long story of that.
I went to Grace. I wanted to be Zach's sister, all the way back to Zach. Zach's sister Heather. She told me when I was like sophomore.
Which was Jordan's wife.
Jordan's wife.
Okay.
She told me, like, AJ, I could see you being a pastor one day. And I was like, no, dude. I'm barely a Christian. Like, I remember my goal in life.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, I don't really want to be a pastor. But then as I grew and started to read the Bible more, and my love for people and God's people, like in his church, it grew. And I started to realize a little bit more of like what a pastor was and the role that they had. it became a little bit more attractive to me. So over the next 2 years, from sophomore to like later junior year, senior year, I like clung to that call.
Yeah.
And so I went to Grace to be, and I was a pastoral ministry student.
Yep.
And I was there for a year, and I got connected to a couple guys who were upperclassmen. They were older, and they were some of the leaders on the campus. And he was a youth pastor at a different church, and they connected me to some of the other like alumni from the school. And Andrew's brother, Jared Clark, he was one of the guys that I went to school with. We were friends, and so I began to kind of. I don't recommend this, but it's just my story. Like, as a freshman coming in, I was hanging out with more of the alumni upperclassmen than I was my own class. And so I had ambition, and my eyes were forward, although I wish that I spent a little bit more time in relationship with like my peers. I think that would have been much easier for me instead of constantly trying to
the next thing.
And so that for that season, that's when I discovered just a love for theology and a serious like depth for leadership in his church. And so I knew I felt the call to be a pastor, but this was when it was refining intellectually for me. I started to actually like think about it more.
So that's all happening, and so are you kind of seeing this like double life narrative start to like fall by the wayside, or like?
Oh, that's right. So it definitely was. Through that season, the Lord was humbling me and shaving off my flesh. So cool. I lived a couple years as a Christian, growing, like a young Christian, and then I like relapsed a little bit, backpedaled. And then early on in my relationship with Carissa, I was a poor leader in that relationship. And through that, going to Bible college, being a bad man of God, I was humbled hard. And so through that season, just being evidenced just how much of a hypocrite I was being, it was very real. And so the Lord was just shaving off flesh. And it was painful, right? Because that's what it hurts when you're shaving, So I had warts on all my fingers. It hurts when the knife is cutting away.
When I first moved here.
And it's painful to remove the flesh, but it's important when the flesh is what's killing you.
That's good. So is there like a specific, like, I don't know, to somebody that's kind of living in that tension of like, this is everything I like desire spiritually speaking is like right here, but I'm stuck. Like, what did that, because obviously like, like the Lord like did that work. Like he is the one that like continued in that like churchy ghetto word sanctification process. But like on your end, like there's effort involved, right? There's a surrender involved. There's, so like for you, like to the individual, maybe that's living in that tension currently, maybe it's a student, maybe it's an adult, maybe it's somebody, a grandfather, like, I don't know. But like, what encouragement would you give to the individual that's living kind of in that tension of like, I see what I want. Just like Paul talks about, right? I the thing that I want, I don't do, but the thing I don't want to do, I do it. And so like in that tension, like what would be the encouragement you would give to that individual?
I guess it would be twofold. I'm going to challenge and then I'll encourage. Cause when you're in that space, like you don't need the soft encouragement.
Encourage is always challenged.
Right. You need to,
you can ask me to step it up. I just yell at kids. That's my encouragement.
I pray that your sin is exposed, and you should pray that too. Because the devil wants nothing more than to fight you in the dark, because he's going to win. When you're alone and when you're not doing it, when you're not being honest about what you're actually struggling with. But when your sin's exposed, that's a painful, but that's again, sanctifying work. God is making you more like Christ. He's cutting away at the flesh, and you're putting on righteousness. And so I would say if you are living if you're a double-minded man, if you're living one life on Mondays as you are on, well, let's just be honest. If you're living one life on Friday nights as you are on Sunday mornings, you're being a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Like you're a fake Christian. So you're either not a Christian or you're living antithetical to the Christian life, and you got to stop it.
Yeah.
And so it's that simple.
Yep.
Just stop it. Because the Spirit of God, if you are a Christian, the Spirit of God gives you self-control. So you're no longer under the power of sin. So sin doesn't have dominion over you anymore. Yeah. The Spirit in you makes you free from the chains that sin has on you. That's Romans 6. Yeah. So like we have the ability by the grace of God, through the work of Christ, by the work of the Spirit in us, to say no to sin. And so if that's you and you're realizing it, first off, thank God that you realize it, because you could be blind to it. But second off, don't fight the devil in the dark. Open up. Pray that it's exposed, or expose yourself to people you love and care for you. And then start chipping away at it. Yeah. Start chipping away at the sin.
Yeah, expose it to the light. That's so good. Like invite community into it. I think the book of James, front to back, is a beautiful picture of what that can look like in the life of a believer, whether it be confessing to a brother, the dangers of allowing your desires and temptations to lead the way and what those lead to. But yeah, I think that's so good. So good. So yeah, go to Bible college. I love bunny trails. It's one of the things we say here at the Tab is this is our podcast and we'll do whatever we want.
I like it.
This could be a 5-part episode. But so yeah, you're at Bible college, you meet all these guys, and so kind of what unfolds from there as these like your ambition, like you said, your ambition's kind of leading the way. Like it, love it, hate it, whatever. It's what happened. And so how did that kind of unfold? How did you end up here? Like stuff like that.
Yeah, Andrew Clark was my boy. I didn't know him at the time. I knew his brother, and I knew a lot of his friends. And so he was youth pastor up here at Westside and Traverse. And so I was just some college student, and he was preaching one day at one of the events. He brought his youth group out. They led worship and whatever. So it was so cool. I was there, and then this older pastor guy, like, was preaching, and then he saw me just sitting in the worship center, the chapel. He was like, AJ Garcia, I want to talk to you after this. I'm like, who are you? I don't even know you. Yeah. And so then I got to meet him, and it was a really good connection. I really liked him. He loved the Lord, and I saw that he was a leader. People looked up to him and respected him. I respected him. And so it was a really cool, like, immediate connection. Over the next month or two, as summer kind of was coming up, he called me. Like, we followed each other, and so we connected over social media a little bit. He called me, and he basically offered a summer internship at the church. And so I was doing, communications, creative stuff, photo, video.
Was that a passion at that time? Because you're like, anybody that knows you knows that that's a gift you have. I don't know necessarily if that's your calling based off what I've seen the fruit of your life be, but it's clearly a gift. It's something that you have. But did you know that at that time, like?
I liked it. Yeah. I really liked it. And I thought.
Photography, like Photoshop, like all that kind of creative stuff.
Yeah, I got
The bro runs a mean Instagram, people. That's what I'm trying to say. If I had the resource and the time and the ability to make AJ Garcia my social media manager,
oh man,
be the first thing I did.
That's I'm blushing. I liked it, and it was a potential option. I didn't know how far that would take me. Yeah. And yeah, I definitely was learning and growing a lot in it. And so at the time, that was something I was sharpening, and I wanted to keep doing. Yeah. And so they offered me a summer internship pressing into creative stuff, doing communications, photo, video, graphics, website, just a digital space, social media. Yeah. So I came up for the internship for the summer, and after a couple months, Pastor John, Andrew's dad, we were out on the I'm a city boy. And so he was like, AJ, meet me at the cabin. We're going to go on a golf cart, and we're going to, pour deer feed. Cause hunting season was coming up. Yeah. And so anyways, we drove around, and he was asking me a bunch of questions. I was asking him questions. And, I remember us getting to the end of it and parking, and Pastor John looked over and asked me all the stuff I wanted to do, like where my heart was at, like just dream with me. So I was dreaming. He was like, why can't you do that at Westside? We would love to hire you if that's something you want. And I fell in love with the people, fell in love with the church, and I thought, all right, why not Westside? That's
cool.
So I committed 3 years here. After that 3 years, I looked around. I'm like, all right, I'll give it another 3 years.
Were you still doing school online at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been doing school online.
Yeah.
I've had like 2 years that I not connected, but 2 separate years. I took a gap year. COVID was one of them, because while everyone else got a break around the world,
social media
did
not.
it. Yeah.
Which you killed it.
It was intense.
Yeah, you killed it. I am curious, and you can tell me, shut up if you want. But was there a point like within like following like that opportunity of doing creative stuff where maybe like you had this awareness of like, man, maybe my ambition led the way here? And that wasn't like, because obviously like your call in your life is like pastoral ministry. Like you can see it in your heart, how you love people, how you dissect and communicate God's word. Like that's very clear. So like, was there ever like this tension point of like, man, I'm doing this like social media creative side and like I'm good at it. But was there a tension of like, but man, I feel like I'm called to like this? Was there like, did you ever have a tension like that? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think there was a tension there because I was on staff as the director of social media, and I was getting opportunities to preach. Like I'm so thankful for John, and I'm thankful for Andrew, who gave me a ton of opportunities to lead and to preach while I was still doing social media. So I preached on, like as not a pastor at the church, I was preaching on Sundays because John saw that gifting in me, and he gave me opportunities. Cool. He stretched me, challenged me. Andrew did the same in Elevate, our youth group, and gave me opportunities. And he stretched me, challenged me, and they both formed somebody who like had passions but refined it. Yeah, that's cool. And so I'm really thankful for that. But yeah, of course, like there's this like I desire to do more, and I'm only kind of pigeonholed in this spot. Now that I'm doing more, I'm preaching, 2 to 3 times a week, like. And I have leadership.
Hey, we're in the same grind, bro.
Right. Amount, youth, like, young adults.
You and I and
sometimes.
Adam, like it's like, dude, the amount of content, which is a blessing and at times, for the lack of a better term, a curse. But
and you write your own stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm way too like, I guess nerd could be a word. Yeah. Controlling could be a word. I find joy in writing my own stuff. No sideways energy towards anybody that uses curriculum. Right. Do your thing. But you're probably a better youth pastor than I am.
But there is a reality that there's more work involved in that. Yep. And I mean, that's the whole point. That's why people use curriculum, because it's not as much work. They can put energy other places. Yep. But if you're doing it as many times, and I know you and Adam are, because I'm doing it with you, it pulls a lot. So putting out all this content now, for a minute I resented all that time that I was, before I started doing this, I was resenting like how much time that I felt wasting, quote unquote, on social media and creative stuff. But now I'm really grateful for that season, because one, they're tools that I have. Yeah. And I can speak that language to other creatives, to where they are on the team, and I'm able to say like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Yep. And they can run with it.
That's so good. That's such a clear gifting that you have. And I love just your overall, this is going to sound I'm going to get roasted at the tabernacle for the statement I'm about to say.
Wait.
But just the overall aesthetic that you like put out, like social media wise, is something that I love. It's something that I have learned from. I've learned so much about social media from you. So definitely a gifting. But I was just curious, like, because it was like you said, like, man, my ambition was leading the way. Like I just wanted, like, my eyes were forward. And so like, I know for me, I remember when I first got into like local church ministry, I'd been a Christian for like 14 seconds. And they were like, hey, do you want to be the youth pastor at this campus? And I was like, duh. Right. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done this. But I'll just keep it pushing. And so, yeah, I definitely have been and existed in that space. So I was just curious, but man, yeah. So come do your thing. You're doing social media. Some transitions happen. You're now the youth pastor at Westside Community Church, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Your wife moves up here. You guys did long distance for a minute, right?
Yeah, we're pushing our 3rd year married in June.
Because you guys weren't married when I first met you, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
No, 3 years in June, but we're going to be together for 8 years.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we dated for 5 years, long distance for 4.5 of those.
Yeah.
COVID got us the last 6 months. Yeah. And so long distance for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
It's tough, but it helped us communicate better.
Yeah, that's for sure. Hope and I both did long distance as well. And I think we'd say the same thing. Like you're very proximity wasn't enough at that point. You had to learn how to communicate and stuff. So, but yeah. So in that transition piece of becoming like stepping into like a pastoral role in ministry and stuff like that, like how's that been? Like relationship with Christ, like in your changed life story, like seeing that shift happen. Like, can you speak to that at all?
I think God has taught me a lot about suffering and sanctification. And looking back over the years, I know I'm only 25, and there are, to qualify unnecessarily, but there are plenty of other people who've gone through significantly a lot more than I have. So that being out of the way, I've seen some crap, and so
you have.
I'm grateful and humbled that, and these aren't like just churchy words. Like I mean it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm grateful to God and I'm humbled that if not for the grace of God, I'd be like anyone else who's walked away from the faith.
Yeah.
And so John Piper says, 1,000 sorrows prepares a man to preach. And I think that
you're getting close.
The same thing, right? The same thing is true though. Like 1,000 sorrows prepares the Christian to live. The life of Christ comes with suffering.
Yeah.
And the Bible promises that. But it's not the one who suffers little that is close to God because they're blessed or whatever. Yeah. It's the one who suffers either much or whatever, but who does it clinging to the cross.
Yeah, that's so good.
And so I think that God has taught me a lot about depending on Him, and I don't do it like perfectly, and I try and do it well. But through the years now, pastoring youth and young adults, I'm able to see, because I lived without, I'm able to see what they need, and I'm trying to push them toward that for their long-term growth.
Yeah, and something I see in you that you do really well as well is you understand your inability to do it for all of them. And so your passion for raising up a generation of leaders as well, so that way each student can have an opportunity to be poured into, an opportunity that you didn't have. I think that's something you do really well. And your young adults ministry is one that is ministering to lost and to broken people, but as well is raising up kind of like this next generation of church leadership. And that's very clear just in how you pastor and how you kind of give your life to those people. And it's evident in your student ministry as well that a lot of the things that the lack that you had in coming up as a young believer, you are passionate about that not being the experience of your students. And that comes to play, one, in how you live, but also in how you raise up leaders as well to fill those holes and those gaps as well. So I think that's something you do really, really well. So
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And don't do it alone. Got a great team around me, but and Justin and Ron, pastors at our church, are incredible at keeping me in line and pushing me toward that.
I got to meet this homie Ron. I've never met Ron. I've
Ron's
heard about
the best.
Ron. Yeah.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah. I need to come terrorize the offices of Westside like I used to.
Please do.
Yeah. You still got that stupid mini fridge with LaCroix in it?
No, I gave it away as a prize.
I saw that you guys gave away a little mini fridge. I was like, he's just giving stuff away in his office. I'm
cleaning out my office. And Charlene, one of my leaders, she's on staff at the church. She suggested that. That was a great idea. And I'm like, yeah. So now I'm looking around my office. I'm like, what else do I need to give away? Looking at my closet. I'm like, what pair of shoes can I give away?
So those forces you're giving away are busted. The kids just don't know it.
Yeah. Dude,
they're actually Court Royals. They're not even Air Force Ones.
Britton roasted me one of the first times we met. This has been the topic of many like therapeutic conversations. I walk in and Britton's like, "Bro, when are you getting a new pair of shoes?" Because I had like all like busted up.
I was at the old Mundos too,
Yeah.
the crappy parking lot. But yeah, man, I love. I don't know. You're a good friend, and I appreciate you coming and being a part of this. But I do want to give kind of like a lasting like question or an opportunity for you to share your heart. But for those out there that are maybe navigating this kind of a long suffering, something that is evident in your life with just pastoral transitions and moral failures and shortcomings and death that you have experienced in your life, it's evident that through that, as you've communicated, that you've clung to the cross. The grace of God has been something that's carried you through. But just, I don't know, like in a pastoral heart for those people that are maybe in that like season of suffering, in that that time of not knowing, like of doubt maybe, or something of that, kind of speaking to that listener as well. If there's anything else you want to say, just kind of in conclusion for the pod.
Man, so much could be said. I think to not grow weary of doing what is good, to ask the Lord to keep your heart tender, because it can make you callous and hard, like hard-hearted, and it's not worth it. But to go through that affliction to where the problem is that so many of us are, we desire to be thick-skinned and soft-hearted, but we are thin-skinned and hard-hearted. Everything gets to us, and we're not willing to change.
Yeah.
But I think we should be
word.
thick-skinned and soft-hearted. Like, all right, I'll take the bullets, but when I realize I'm lacking, I will shift.
Yeah.
And I'll humble myself to be able to move. And so, keep your heart tender. Don't grow weary of doing what is good, and keep your eyes on Jesus.
It's good. So good. And then as a fellow youth and young adults pastor sitting here, maybe a word of encouragement to kind of that demographic that listens to the podcast.
Read your Bible.
Amen.
Read it. How else are you going to know God if you don't read His
Word? Absolutely. Establish that rhythm now, and it's nothing crazy.
Go to church.
Belong to community. I think those are things that I saw come to play in your story. I love that. Yeah. Oh, man. Skylar, the boy needs some help. All right. He's got, we got pleather.
No free shout-outs.
None. No shout-outs to this.
I keep that ESV on me, bro.
Hey, I'm with the ESV. I get behind you on that, but my man.
Yeah.
It's like building a house with a hammer from Walmart.
Hey, I don't trust anybody with a pretty Bible.
You're way too good of a preacher to be using pleather. All right. No, you can throttle your goat skin, bro, but I'm just saying. Come on.
All right. Well, Tabernacle, hook me up.
See if the podcast has a budget to get this man a new Bible. I know you can't read that on stage. Look how small that font is.
What you mean?
Oh, man. For those of you maybe podcast checking it out, I'm going to start a fund to get this man a new Bible. My goodness. No, I love it. I've been picking on you that for years. So.
For real.
Get your hands on that.
Let me see this.
Yeah, that's real
What's
life.
it feel like?
That's real life, son. Yeah.
Wow.
Look at that. Look at that flop, Benji.
Benji, look at that.
Look at that.
Look at that
Look
flop.
at that flop, Benji. Hey.
It's a good flop.
Love it. Hey, Tab family, AJ, bro, thank you so much.
Love you, bro.
For jumping on. I'm excited for the episodes to come out of this. Talking about youth and young adult stuff. Suffering apparently is something we can spend some time diving into. Maybe some spiritual warfare type stuff. But yeah.
And you know what? Real quick, Tabernacle family. You guys are blessed with a staff of pastors who love the Lord, love His Word, and are no BS. If I'm allowed to, I mean, you guys.
You could probably just say it, but I'm not gonna make it. Yeah, Tim would approve.
And I think that we are so easy to overlook what we're blessed with, and to long for something more, but don't, because you guys are blessed. Tab fam, you are so blessed, and so. Yeah, that's it.
Appreciate you, bro. Students out there listening to this podcast, Camp 23.
Come on.
Coming up.
Yes,
July 24th through the 28th. The price goes up after July 1st, so get that early bird special, $200, 2-month early bird special.
Come on.
That's what I've been selling it to people. Hey, but you're going to want to come out. It'll be us, West Side. Bayview, New Hope, Kensington. I know for all the old dogs out there, like, what? All these churches are partnering? It's Kingdom. It's Kingdom, and we're getting after it. We're going to be out in Gaylord again. Excited. Got Chris Marvin, the Spark, Paul Epperson. Going to be a great time. Got plenty of fun stuff planned. I'm probably going to slam AJ in the mud pit again.
That's okay.
Hey, but he's been running. So
I've been running.
Yeah,
I've been trying.
I've been running. Forrest Gump. All right, love it. Hey, until next time, Tab family, this is AJ, Benji, and Britton signing off.